Hello, my name is Francis Coliato, your Executive Director at Visual Communications. In our work to create spaces for expression, engagement, and empowerment, VC and our partners proudly present the Asian Pacific Virtual Showcase. It is our hope that this showcase of our stories will be a start for audiences to rediscover our humanity. In solidarity with our partners, our collective movements not only exhibit actions towards diversity, equity, and inclusion, but our anti-racist work to uplift storytellers who use the power of media to dismantle supremacist structures. Thank you for joining us today as we continue to move forward in uplifting and connecting our communities. Welcome to the Asian Pacific Virtual Showcase.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to our panel today, or conversation. Today's conversation really centers on the value of mental health and wellness, and really the acknowledgement of our mental health and how it is affected by social and structural factors that kind of make it more difficult to sort of attain or maintain, especially just in our day-to-day. So my name is Ryan, and I am a Black and Asian American creative. I am wearing a black zip up. It's from 2003. It's from like my old job. I used to work at this place called Newbury Comics in Boston. And I still wear this. This has been like my favorite sweater during COVID. Behind me is my living room, and has a couple of plants and my couch, and I'm calling in from Portland, a home to many peoples along the Columbia River. And I'm also a practicing psychic teacher and meditation and energy healing practitioner. And I like pizza. I'm going to pass it on to Daryn.
Thanks, Ryan. Hello, everybody. My name is Daryn Wakasa, pronouns he, him. I am wearing a forest green t-shirt. I have trying to channel my plant babies here in the background, predominantly white walled room. And I'm streaming from Mar Vista, which is a mixture of Chumash and Tongva people land. Writer and director, but have used the filmmaking process to lead workshops on mental health. And I'm just really honored and touched to share space with everybody here. So I will pass the mic to Eddy.
Thanks, Daryn. Hi, everyone. My name is Eddy Gana Jr. My pronouns are they, them, he, him. And I am wearing a gray long sleeve shirt and black pants. I'm in my office with white walls, and then behind me are various trinkets for organizing and a desk. And I am calling in from Los Angeles area, so recognizing the stolen land of Tongva. And my profession and my background is that I am a Filipinx American poet, community organizer, and mental health counselor. Currently do work at SIPA, Search to Involve Filipino Americans. And so I'd like to pass the mic off to Danny Boy.
Thank you, Eddy, Daryn, and Ryan for all going first, saving me for last. Again, my name is Danny Boy, Naha-Ve'evalu. I am wearing a black t-shirt that is just drying up from playing a little bit of volleyball. And the room I'm in, it's an office space, but I have it all blurred out in the background due to the lovely filters that are provided through this platform. I'm calling in from San Francisco, California, which is native land of the Ohlone people, the Ohlone tribe. My profession is I'm the program manager for the Pacific Islander Collaborative, known as Pacifica United, through the Psalm 1 Community Development Center, which is located here in San Francisco. I've done a lot of work as an outreach worker with mental health, and also as a program coordinator with a leadership program for Pacific Islander college age students. I'm really blessed to be here with you all to share space, share knowledge, and wisdom with you all. So thank you for this space.
Thank you. This conversation is really more therapeutic than anything for me. Most of the time I feel like I'm like constantly trying to figure just life out all the time, so I think we often put an emphasis on doing a lot and resisting, right? And so I've been wanting to practice more of just like listening and being sometimes, and I think I want to do a lot of that today, as well. I mean, of course I'll be communicating, but it's just like, I'm just happy to be here and just listen to all of you. So that being said, what started you all on your mental health and wellness journey? We can start with T-Boy.
Thank you, Ryan. I think some of the things that started me on my mental health journey was, for one, dealing with my sexual identity. It was something that I really struggled with all throughout my life, and I don't think I actually addressed it until maybe I was like in my early 20s, but seriously, more so in my mid 20s. And it was an evolutionary process of figuring out what I was comfortable with, what I was okay with. There was a lot of factors that played into, just kind of like what I was going through, being policed as a young person, expectations of me because I am a cisgendered male in a family that expected me to play football, do a lot of masculine things. And while I am very masculine, I think I also inhibit very feminine attributes, I guess, or behaviors. So just kind of like coming to terms with that is definitely a big part of like when I started thinking about my mental health. It was also coming from a single parent home, dealing with issues with both my parents and how it impacted my life, to the way in which I like saw myself, saw them, saw others, saw the world. So I think that that's kind of like what started me on this journey of addressing my own personal mental health.
Thanks, D-Boy. It's interesting. A lot of what you said resonated with me, growing up in East Los Angeles in the 80s and 90s, very urban, embedded in hip hop culture, and, not having a lot of figures within media that represented a cisgendered Asian American male. So it was just this hyper masculine men that really, I think, internalized racism, and the way that manifested was this hyper machismo persona. And obviously I could say that now, I didn't know it then, but it was all about puffing up your chest and not showing emotions, especially playing sports, getting on the basketball court. I could check every box of toxic masculinity off because it was like, in my mind, it felt like this survival mechanism. But what ended up happening is that really deep down inside, that self-hatred, internalized racism, the anxiety, the depression, really just manifested in a lot of rage, not even just anger, but rage. And I think as I got older, kind of like you, D-Boy, in my 20s, even my early 30s, I really had to take a hard look at myself because that rage was hurting people in my life. And then just really, at some point just went to me, right? It became destructive. And I think that was my introduction on mental health. That was my entry point because I was hurting my family, and that was verbally abusive, emotionally abusive, just physically just out of control sometimes. And so, coincidentally, that was the time also I took a step as a filmmaker to really just kind of step into my own voice and try to work on my own film, step out of the commercial industry. And I think filmmaking, the creative process, along with Western and Eastern therapy, really helped me understand that what I was suffering from was not just anxiety, depression, and then I'm clinically OCD, but intergenerational trauma. So I would say that was my entry point. It was, I don't know that it was the entry point. It was just really just a life journey into mental health.
Thank you, Daryn. Thank you so much. Yeah, just thinking about journey and trauma and feeling like I shouldn't cry or I shouldn't like voice out like how I'm feeling. For me, it started when I was about 14 years old or so, is when I lost my my grandmother. And in the Filipino household, we're all together. So I had like my grandma there, both my parents and my siblings. And my mom would work, my dad would work, and so it'd be my grandma that would be taking care of me and my siblings. And so losing her essentially was losing my mom. And so I was going through that, grief and loss. Really hard to find words how to express it. So during that time, I was just very isolated. I didn't want to talk to people. I didn't want to like connect with friends. I was known as like the shy person in the back of the classroom, and it happened for quite a while. And fortunately, through community, a youth group actually called Filipino Youth Coalition, got me involved and encouraged me to share my story through the arts. And arts essentially saved my life, my sanity, and my well-being. Being able to just express myself on a mic, being able to hear others express themselves on the mic, or we just listen and just like resonate and like build with each other. And in that way, I found more comfortability in how I can express myself. And I'm still, learning, in terms of like gender identity, just quite recently being more comfortable identifying as gender queer, because like for my life, my dad referring me, my brother referring me as a son or brother. I'm finding more of my safety being queer. And it's not often that I talk about it even still. And it's just that ongoing journey. But arts has helped me to just find that balance. And then of course, yeah, with counseling and services there. But it's ongoing. So yeah.
Yeah, for me, I've just always been really sensitive, even since I was like a kid. Like I was, very, I would say just like more close to like women or girls, like just because of, and I was made fun of for that actually, hanging out with, and I wasn't hanging out with, the guys who like sports or things like that. But, as I started to kind of like go into high school and all of that, I really started to kind of lean into the sensitivity a little bit more and recognize that I was like, because I grew up kind of in like a woo-woo family who was like really into like alternative medicine and spirituality and meditation and all that. I was actually into that as well. And so I decided to just study it. And it was just easy. It was easy for me to incorporate this in my life. And I feel privileged that I had that support in my community and in my family. It's something that I could talk about like my wellness journey, my mental health, like it was just something that I think was just always there, where there were other things that kind of, fell off the boat or kind of just didn't work. But when it came to spirituality and mental health and all that, it was just always in the forefront. So I feel like I faced a lot of, some of the thoughts that I would have. And I'm also, in my life, struggled with my own sexuality as well. So it's something that, and being able to talk about it, and so I think, since high school, I've just been able to really just go on this journey, I would say, of exploration, self-exploration. And today I feel like when it comes to facing some of the things that are harder in my life, I have the tools to like really work through them. And it's been, it's just been, I just feel lucky that I have that. And I want to teach that to people. I want to help people in that way, to give them tools and to be their support,
When I hear all of you talk, there's this external internal conflict, if I'm framing it correctly, right? Like whether it be familial perception, cultural, societal, and then what we internally feel comfortable with, right? Or feel like is authentic to our soul. For all of you, where was the inspiration or that turning point where you all were like, you know what, this isn't me, what society, what family is telling me I'm supposed to be, and instead I am going to, Ryan, I think you alluded to it, like even just explore that so I can find what feels right. Like what was that turning point for you all, if you don't mind me asking?
Can I go first?
Totally. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I really appreciate the question, Daryn, because it's really forcing me to think about like, when was that moment? Because I think there were like several moments before it was a moment that I actually chose. Right. Because people would always kind of say, like, oh, Danny boy, isn't he gay, or he's this or he's that, kind of like talk behind my back. So I knew that was happening. And then I would suppress it. And then there was like, experiences that I had with friends, right, where they were like sexual experiences. And then it was kind of like awkward after that, right? And then even in dating someone of the opposite gender, right? Like they would tell my partner who I was with, like, "Oh, why are you with him? He's this, he's that," and they never like believed them, and so it was like a genuine kind of love. But I think that there was a moment, I think just in my life where, I was holding this idea of like recognizing the fact that I was attracted to men and having trouble dealing with it, right? Having trouble coming to terms with it because of what I was taught and, what was expected of me and how I was, taught to behave or act. And so there was a lot of moments of suicidal ideation, because I just thought, I wasn't a good person, or that there was something wrong with me. And I remember having this kind of like epiphany. I think I was like 24 or 25. And I like to refer to it as, like the creator, our creator, or even God, that like, kind of filled me with this feeling of like, you need to live your truth. Like you need to do this, or it's going to, or like ruin your life if you keep putting it off. Basically like live your truth. And it felt like a divine kind of intervention. You know what I mean? Because it was just a one-on-one kind of thing. And even at that moment, like I didn't quite understand what that meant or what I was to do after that, but it was from that moment where I started to like allow myself to creak, what do you call that? Like open the door just a little bit, crack it open just a little, you know, little bit, little by little. So that was kind of the point for me. Yeah, it was having that divine intervention. How about other folks? How about you, Eddy?
Yeah, well, thank you, Danny boy. You know, like divine intervention or like a voice or just like that feeling, right? It's sort of hard to explain, but when it happens, like it feels right, you know. For me, in terms of my gender identity and as gender queer, dang, just like good question, Daryn, first of all. But like thinking about when was that a turning point? I would have to say with community spaces. So I organized an open mic series, and through this, you know, through poetry, through music and songwriting, you have folks who are like brave as hell, like on the mic, like sharing their stories. And while organizing this space, like it's for them. And also I'm inspired by how they're sharing, you know, and when they talk about their own identities, their own traumas, and I resonate with that. So I'm a mental health counselor, right? But like for like our spaces, like, you know, we're all community in it. And so being able to draw inspiration from friends who know who they are, or, you know, are still figuring it out, and it has then asking me that question, like, who am I? Like, am I a man? You know, and how come it doesn't feel as comfortable when people say brother to me, or, you know, say bro or things like that? Like, it's always like something that's like wrong when folks say that. And I sort of just like, you know, sweep it under the rug kind of thing. Like, you know, they're just trying to show respect, but it never felt right with me. And then just like how I act with other folks. I do have a, by folks I mean like family, my partner, Stephanie. Like we are in a relationship and a marriage that appears, you know, cis and, you know, heteronormative, like in that way. You know, so being able to have her as and she also goes by them as a way to explore where I'm at and also explore where she's at. So then we can dialogue, and just like through that dialogue, like those questions, those tough times, even like questioning, you know, like, you know, are we like where we're supposed to be right now? Is it okay how I'm feeling right now? Is it okay how they're feeling right now? But then like Danny boy is like, just like, I don't know, like one day, just like, I don't know, it just like clicked, you know. It's like, you know what? I'm not within this binary. I'm non-binary, and this is who I am, and that's okay. And, you know, that's thanks to, you know, that community love, the open mic spaces, folks who are bravely sharing their stories, folks who support me and I support them, to be able to find like my footing. And I'm still trying to figure it out, you know, honestly. I think this is my first time publicly even like speaking about it. So, and, you know, it speaks to the safe space that we're creating here. So, thanks, y'all. So, how about you, Ryan? Yeah.
I hope I answered this question correctly, but I think I've always been a seeker and searching for something. And I think it's always been sort of that divine or spiritual part of myself. And so I feel like I'm not done with that, right? Like, I don't know if there was ever really a turning point for me, but if I had to choose, I think it would be when I started teaching others. And a part of it is the vulnerability, I think. And that even though I consider myself a teacher, I'm still a student too, to like and embodying both, I would say. And kind of going off track a little bit here, when it, in terms of like, I think I remember you talking about like family and a part of your question, and I think that again, there was this drive to sort of separate out from family a little bit too, to discover who I was and who I am. And, it was a bumpy road. I think it's uncomfortable when you are finding yourself and looking, for who you really are. And that familial sort of influence, community influence, even though it can be a support, sometimes separating out has been something huge for me on this journey, and finding my own answers about like how do I really feel about something versus like what's quote unquote programmed, or what what does my family or community think about this? It's like, what do I actually really think about this away from everyone else? And then I can decide, like, how do I interact in the world, or how do I be with this group of people or my family? And I think that I'm continuing to do that. It's like this kind of separating and then coming back, separating, coming back. It's like, and I think that's been really healing for me. I'm interested in your sort of therapy journey and access to therapy. And is there something you want to share about that, or interested in sharing about that?
So I'm really big on mental health. I really advocate for folks to find practices that work for them, because traditional Western therapy may not be for everyone. But I also encourage them to try it, because it's also something that could be beneficial for the individual, depending on if they find the right person for them, because not every therapist, counselor, whomever is the right fit for one person. That's something that I've learned in just having conversations with folks. But as much as I've advocated, as much as I've talked about wanting to seek out traditional Western therapy, I've always said I was going to, but never did. Part of it is not having access to it. And even when I did have access to it, I had those opportunities and never took advantage of them. And I think it was because, like, deep down inside, there's stigma associated with it, but also I can't quite identify like why I haven't like actually gone to seek it out. And I could attribute that to like growing up, I come from a single parent home, and we didn't necessarily have like medical coverage, dental coverage, things like that. So going to the doctor was never something that we did on a regular, and so even something as what may seem foreign as like therapy or counseling or anything like that, or talking about your problems, maybe that's kind of like incorporated into like why I haven't actually taken that leap of faith. I find more solace and more therapy in like these kinds of spaces, right? Where we have community spaces. I really love how Eddy's talking about how arts has contributed to his healing, because definitely has contributed to mine. I think there's a lot of inspiration and just being able to live your truth by like how folks are able to put words together that really hit your core, that you really resonate with. There's something that I do, it's for free. I don't think I came up with it. I was going through a lot, recently, and I just decided to go out to look at the ocean, because the ocean is right over the mountain from where I live. And I just went live on my Facebook, and I was calling it Ocean Therapy, and then I just kept doing it periodic, or actually daily. I was going and just like I would film it and take it in, but also to share it, with folks who may not have that access to get to the ocean due to whatever their circumstances are, and that was kind of like a way for me to meditate, manifest, pray, breathe in, breathe out, just get some kind of do some kind of actions that took me outside of my thoughts, and outside of my feelings and emotions. but also helped me pay attention to those things, because there's been some really hard days and I've gone to the ocean and it's like, I'm trying really hard and I'm forcing myself to like, you know, take in the ocean and change the mood, but it's not changing, right? And so it's like, you know, I noticed that like that can only go so far.
Yeah, I
Eddie.
just want to say, I hella resonate with you, like with the ocean. I mean, we're island people, like that's like my safe space. I like to just like drive down the coast, be like near the cliffs, just listen to the oceans, and I feel like it's speaking to me. It's not something calling out to me. I can't. No offense to folks who aren't around bodies of water, but I can't imagine not being next to a body of water. I mean, I got to be somewhere with a body of water. Yeah. But to go back to the question about like therapy and treatment, when I went to UC Irvine, my college days, I was a peer coach, a life coach at a UC counseling center. Sort of hard to believe, like a life coach when I'm also still trying to figure it out as young 20s. But it's for like underclassmen, so it's a upperclassmen then for underclassmen. And so during that program, they recommended to have a therapist. And for me, like prior to that, I didn't want to get into therapy because I was worried about like paying it. I wasn't sure like, oh, health insurance, would it cover it? Who am I going to speak to? I already speak to a doctor already. Like, why do I need to speak to a therapist? So that's where I found, in my high school days, I more found like the community spaces, Filipino Youth Coalition and open mics, things like that. Then my college days, I was encouraged to do the treatment and therapy. And I'm very thankful for that because it really opened my eyes to, just like how that work is done there, like in the counseling room with folks that can like hear me out for my story. Not to say that wasn't happening in the community spaces, it's just a different type of space. And for me, for it to be all confidential and all that. But it got me into that journey, just like trusting folks in the mental health field while still doing my own coping skills, whether it be like writing poetry, whether it be more mindfulness, or even before I even like learned the term mindfulness, just being present, just like listening to what's going on around me, going to the ocean, the beach, and listening to the waves. But then all that coming together in a more like holistic view. And so I still carry that today. It also helped me when I was in my grad program, in the social work program at USC, and also seeing a therapist at that time. And it's okay to do so. I feel like there's a stigma out there, like there's already a stigma of mental health, right? But even more so for like mental health folks, professionals, be like, oh, mental health professionals, but you also see a mental health professional, like what's going on there? But it's all right. Like we're all people, we're all working through traumas, we're all working through our issues, and it's important that we address it rather than ignore it. And so that was how it was like for me back in grad school, that I still carry today, and that I value in the spaces that I am part of. I feel like I could go to therapy more for sure. But right now, like with the community, I get a lot of healing from that now. And so that's what's keep me afloat. Yeah.
Yeah, I've heard you say self-care is community care. I like that.
Yeah, self-care is community care, right? Self-care isn't always in a room alone with a bowl of ice cream and Netflix. It can be, right? Yeah. It can be. But it's also, with the community, open mic spaces, theater productions, like wellness groups, all that. Yeah.
You need a variety of things because not everything can work every time, right? Like it's just like your palate. Like you're not gonna want to eat the same thing day in and day out.
Right. Mm-hmm.
I agree. Yeah, I love that.
Gotta have that variety.
Daryn,
I wondered. Yeah, go ahead, Ryan.
I was going to say, I'm interested in this idea of accessibility and trust. As someone, as a person of color, like discovering different therapies and different ways of taking care of yourself. Like, what have you gone through, or what has been your journey about that?
Well, I'm really appreciative with what everybody's saying because, I've tried everything. I started with psychotherapy. I was very lucky, very privileged. to be able to have that access. And, it had its place within my life. I've had, multiple talk therapy, psychotherapists, but I've also done acupuncture, EMDR, somatic therapy, energy therapy. And then it's crazy that everybody's talking about the ocean, because I also went on a healing journey to Hawaii, and my, extended family out there, indigenous Hawaiians, like, showed me the power of the land, and are just so grateful. And it was such a powerful healing journey. And, I think from a structural level, I think what you're all saying is so important, because it's really just about where your soul guides you. And that's the therapy that you need for that point in time, and it might change, but just because you're not seeing a psychotherapist or psychiatrist doesn't mean you're not getting therapy. And I think that's the perception of therapy that I think we need to tackle too. And this, as we decolonize America, right? Like, decolonizing this image that mental health is the solution for it is only this one Western, driven way. I am on medication, I'm OCD, and I've clinically, I suffer from anxiety and depression, and biologically, I do think there's something there. But I also do think that because medication was a last resort, the acupuncture, the energy therapy, the acting lessons, even though I didn't want to be an actor, like, acting just proved to be an amazing, transformative, therapeutic experience. Like, all that, I think, primed me so that when I finally decided to go on medication, it all worked together, right? It was it was my own recipe of, like, fried rice, gumbo, stew, whatever you were going to put into. I put the flavors that I liked into that so that, I could cook it. And D-Boy, like you said, I think it's very different for everybody. And also, something that I've learned and been reminded of in the pandemic is that the tools that I've relied on sometimes don't work tomorrow or next week or next month. And that's when you seek out new tools, and there's so many different modalities out there for how we can be in therapy, right? And nature is such a powerful thing, right? And we look at our ancestors, and I think there's a reason why, they look to nature. They might have not had the academic rhetoric to be able to talk about it, but their soul yearned for it. And I think that was healing. So I think that's important.
I appreciate that. I mean, even the fact of me trying to hold back some tears, right? Like, there's something there to say. I think just even, thinking about, like, where your soul guides you. You mentioned Hawaii and your extended family out there who are Native Hawaiians, and just reminding you of, like, the power of the land. Like, there was this experience I had with Hawaii where I went there 2010 on an alternative spring break trip with my school, and we went to go and do service for spring break versus just resting, right? And one of the things that we had to do was we tilled the land, we tilled the taro patches. So, our feet were in the land, we're like in the mud, like planting or replanting, dealing with the taro. And so then that was one of the things that we did, amongst other things. My next trip to Hawaii, as soon as I got off the plane, you have to walk from the plane on the ground to the terminal. And as soon as I stepped down, there was, like, this intrinsic, like, vibration that I felt from the soles of my feet coming up. And I was just like, what is that feeling? Like, what is that? I had no idea what it was. And I was talking to everybody, like, trying to describe this feeling. And it wasn't until my last day, and I was talking to my cousin, and he was like, well, what did you do the last time you were here? And I told him about, the alternative spring break trip and tilling the land and working on the taro patches. And he was like, well, that's probably what it is that you connected with the land, with the Aina. And so you coming back, like that mana, as they would call it, the energy, it recognizes you, and you feel it. And just to even think about, like, how powerful that is, and, like, that's a form of therapy, I didn't even know it was a form of therapy, right? Like I was kind of thinking to myself, like, wow, what did I get myself into? But also it's pretty dope because I'm connecting to something that's indigenous to my people. Whereas we think about, decolonization, right? And like, that's something that has been stripped away because of colonization, imperialism, and things like that from us Native folks. And so for you to say that, it really touched my heart, because even right now, coming into this, I'm holding on to something that I'm like, how am I existing in these spaces? How am I existing at work? How am I gonna hold space here on this panel when I'm really going through something that I don't really have anybody to talk to about it, because it's also something that I don't know how to talk about, right? Because then it's really just like exposing the issues, and just like, we had this talk earlier here at work. Sorry, this is going to be my last thought. We had this talk earlier about like depression, signs of depression being where someone is like, not getting out of bed, not eating, doesn't have any energy, not, like all these normal kind of signs. And I was thinking to myself, but there's also functioning people who are depressed, who carry a smile on their face, who are able to get up and go to work and deal with whatever. And so it's just, I was kind of like grappling with all of that. But all of that to say thank you for reminding us to listen to our spirit, right? Listen to our soul, because sometimes it's often hard for us to trust that because we don't know where it will go. So thank you, Daryn.
That is real talk, D-Boy. Like especially during this past year, it's just been like, for me, I'm like somebody who like wants to always like uplift and stay positive, right? Like I just feel like I want to be that light for people, and not recognizing that depression you're talking about, right? Or not really facing that depression. And thank you for pointing that out. It's like, yeah, it's like when you're holding space for people, and I know all three of you do, you're all leaders in some ways, even if you don't consider yourself that. It's like how, and it goes back to this conversation, right? Like, how do you really take care of yourself? Like, how do you really face some of the harder energies and harder like emotions that you're really going through on your own? And then like having to go to work, like you're saying, having to go, interact with folks, and whether it's on Zoom or on the phone. I know we're not necessarily interacting all the time in person, but it's like, how do you keep it all together? And I think it kind of goes back to my point from the beginning. It's like, sometimes just doing nothing, and like that it's okay to not do something. There's all this expectation that we have to figure it out, and like know all the answers. What about you, Eddy?
Yeah, like with that, with the pressure, it's a lot. Like earlier, talking about like external influences, and just like what's going on like with society, we see on social media, family, friends, and whatnot. And like through all that, it's like, how do we take care of ourselves, right? Like, how do we remind ourselves to put on the oxygen mask first before helping other folks, right? And that's what I often remind myself and remind community folks like about that importance there, because often like in spaces you may feel like, oh, we need to take care of this person first or this, but you also need to value your needs first. Otherwise, then you put your own self at danger. And I've had close encounters with that, and I need to remind myself to put on that oxygen mask. If there's anything I listen on the airplane, it's that one. So that's the only thing that I for sure will remember. But also what you shared, Ryan, what I resonated with is the idea of doing nothing. Because like that question is like, oh, what do you do for self-care? And often it's like, damn, what do I do? And you start thinking like, oh, it has to be something, has to be some labor involved. But it can be, like you said, nothing. You can take a day where you decide to rest in bed longer than expected. Don't need to get up. what's important is that you recognize that you are doing that, that you are just being, and that there is a step towards taking care of yourself, starting with that awareness and just like what works best for you and and for me, like what works best for me. I was thinking about this the other day, like mental health looks like writing a poem, but sharing it with no one except for me, myself, and I. It's not always meant to be shared. If anything, it's meant to, to explore what I'm going through in that moment when I'm writing that poem. And, maybe I can reflect on it another day, or perhaps maybe I'll rip it up or I'll delete the note and, I'll come back to it next time.
Eddy, I'm actually curious, if you all don't mind me asking, is how did you know that poetry was that outlet for you all?
Yeah, good question, Daryn. I would have to say, just first like listening to music, growing up and hip hop, and for me, like, yeah, beats are cool, but like lyrics speak to my spirit, so, and that there, just like that rhythm and poetry is where I really found like, hey, I can relate on some level to what a rapper is sharing about. I love like through the lyrics, through the poetry, able to express like what's going on not only in their lives but also what's happening in their communities, and so that then inspired me to write about what's going on with me and what's happening around my community, the Filipino American community, and it got me into that step to like go to an open mic, share with my kasamas. Kasamas is like comrades in the Tagalog, companions, and just going from there.
For me, I think I've always loved storytelling, and so I I remember actually, and I'm also into comics. I love writing scripts for comics and creating characters, and that has been something that's been really healing for me and expressing myself. And so writing has been huge for me. A lot of it I don't share with folks, but I'll be making like superheroes all the time. and just writing about just a lot of the things that I am going through, and like the things that I care about in culture, and it's always been there for me, just as a tool of expression, because for me the work that I do, it's more really focused on working with energy and working with people one-on-one, and it's really focusing on others, and but there's a nerdy side to me, like I'm not just that. I love creating things, so it's and I've been doing it ever since I was a kid, and I can't let it go. Like I still go to the comic book shop like every Wednesday, like when the new comics come out.
Well, what's interesting is, Ryan, when you're saying you write characters all the time, right? And you've been writing superheroes forever. And I recently read this book, Eloquent Rage by Dr. Brittany Cooper. And, she talks about, it's more specifically for Black women, how they're not afforded in society to go through the process of rage, right? Because of how society views them. But we all as human beings need to be able to process our anger and our rage. You can't suppress it. And one thing that she said that really stood out to me is, once you go through that process, everybody should be allowed to go through that process. Once you go through that process, that anger then becomes your superpower. And you can use that as a force for change. And so that really opened my eyes, because I started to look at my characters as parts of me, right? So things that I might be ashamed of to display in real life, or in our physical space, I can write within these characters. So it's almost like stepping outside of myself and taking a look at myself from an omniscient perspective, and be like, you know what, that's not that bad. Like, why are you ashamed of that? And then it actually is a really interesting character. And I think that that's been a really healing process that coincidentally has also made for more creative projects, because humanity, it's all in the nuance, right? It's all what makes us different. I always say that, I used to always tell students at LMU that, your insecurities are your strengths. things. Otherwise, you wouldn't be insecure about something. You're insecure about something because you think you're different, right? But if you embrace that uniqueness, then your insecurity now is your strength, which then translated to characters is a really strong character, a really unique character. And so I've been using that a lot to try to look at myself, but also to look at family members or friends, you know, from a different perspective also, right? Like I might have baggage with somebody. And so I put that person in a character because you want to understand the depth of how they came to be, what their intentions are versus, you know, a lot of times our actions don't necessarily reflect our intentions, you know? And I think what I've learned through all this is that there's a lot of healing in that, you know, and I think also, you know, obviously for myself as the creator, and you know, Eddy, like you said, self-care is community care. You know, I firmly believe that self-healing is familial healing, societal healing, community healing, right? And these stories and these characters, when you're able to purge a lot of like the trauma, the anxiety, the depression, by not just your family members that are living, but by those who are not living as well, I think we're starting this chain reaction of starting to break some of these patterns of trauma through art and through story. And, you know, I think as a filmmaker, that's what I like to explore. You know, it's like the horrors of intergenerational trauma, internalized racism, you know, our severance from nature, you know, our disconnect. And I like to think that, you know, for myself, it's really just about removing the ego and just trying to be a conduit for this stuff to flow out, because I hope that there's a reason why it's flowing through me, and there's a reason why that story is getting out into the world, and I'm hoping that that reason is a collective healing. And that's kind of how I look at my filmmaking process, and it kind of selfishly helps me also you know, tackle the inner demons that I have and be able to sit with them in the passenger seat. You know, I don't think you completely exorcise those demons like this. You learn to live with them and embrace them and let them guide you to what you need, how you need to grow.
So I think we're running out of time now. I could talk about this forever. If there's any final thoughts that you have for the audience, any advice, any organization you want to amplify that is helpful for the audience, or that they can support, would love to hear it. Why don't we start with you, Eddy?
Yeah, I would say, well, yeah, self-care is community care, you know, essentially, and find what works best for you, whether that is going to therapy, whether it is visiting the oceans, whether it's revisiting indigenous practices, you know, holistic point of view. Do what makes you feel well and healed. And some places that you could explore that. I mentioned the open mic space that I organize is Sunday Jump. We're based in historic Filipino town. Right now we are off season, but we will come back hopefully, yes, in person in August. And you know, you come by and you visit every first Sunday of the month at Filipino Workers Center, share your poetry, your music. And we also end every night with a cipher, like talk about processing, right? So like, you know, you're up there on the mic, whatever you feel, whatever's going on through your heart and your mind, you just say it, you know? And we always believe in express, not impress, and free speech, not hate speech. And so, yeah, with that through the arts, or, you know, through more formal means organizations. I do work for SIPA, Search and Involve Filipino Americans. And so folks are interested in mental health services. We do offer referrals and initial assessments there. But at the end of the day, you know, go with what feels right for you in your process of healing. Daryn, you mentioned, you know, like self-healing as familial healing. So, you know, just go at your pace, and, you know, we'll rise together. So, yeah.
Well, obviously I want to thank visual communications. I want to amplify visual communications family. I think, you know, two things. The first one, as cliche as it sounds, is you're not alone. You know, I think I was able to hide myself for decades, and I was really good at it. You know, nobody knew, not even family, not even my closest friends knew what I was going through. So you're not alone in what you're going through. And, you know, I think the second thing is, you know, something my sister has reminded me a lot lately is no matter what you're feeling, your feelings and emotions are always valid, right? And I think we maybe need to be aware of how we execute and manifest those feelings, but the feelings themselves are valid, you know, and there, it's a lot to deal with in itself, the emotions. Don't beat yourself up. And I know it's easier said than done. Don't beat yourself up for feeling something. It's okay to be angry. It's okay to be frustrated. It's okay to be sad, hopeless.
I agree with what both you and you, Daryn, and Eddie said 100%. I think what I have to say might be the same thing, but I'm gonna say diversify your toolbox or your practices. I think that's something that really stood out to me from our conversation is that, you know, there's a bunch of things that we can do and they may not always work. And so definitely have a lot of things to choose from, but also be open to new practices and new things and try things out that might resonate from within, you know, going back to the trusting your soul and listening to your soul. And then something else that a friend told me once that made a lot of sense then, even though it's kind of like common sense, is that, or maybe it's not so common, but just, you know, like alluding to the same thing, Daryn, of like your feelings are valid, whatever you may be feeling, like feel it. Feel like don't suppress it. Don't try to, you know, disregard it, you know, keep trucking, keep moving. Like sometimes things are hard and you have to feel it, but don't let yourself stay there. You know, feel it, let it run its course, and then find out what you need to do next to be okay.
I second everything that you all said. So I'll keep it short. Yeah, again, don't be afraid to try new things. I think we're living in a time where we just have all these options and there is no one right way, right? And that when you kind of approach, say, meditation or going out to the ocean, right? It's like there's no need to have to try to tackle it in terms of, is this going to be a success or a failure? It's just going to be a process that you're going to be working through. Yeah, it's not about the end goal. It's like about the journey, as cliche as it sounds, right? It's like, and don't be afraid to trust is another thing. Like trust yourself, right? And trust others. Being able to just allow yourself to be in the world and to create relationships and try new things and all of that, I think is so important. So thank you. Like this is so healing for me, and I hope it was for the three of you. Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you, audience.
Y'all.
Too. Yeah, thanks
Appreciate
for
it.
This is
watching.
amazing. Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you for
thanks.
the space.